I'm Dr. Waraps, and today I have with me the insufferable poet and inexhaustible vagabond Sparrow. I'm somewhat delighted and alarmed to have with me this guest. I really appreciate it. You've done a great honor to me. I don't often get to speak to such eminent doctoral figures as yourself. I was thinking that you and I should celebrate a holiday together. Do you have any holidays in mind? A holiday? Why exactly? I thought that you were going to ask me about my life. I thought I was here to give some history of myself and maybe read a few of my miraculous poems. Oh. Well, you see, Sparrow, any interviewer can ask these pedantic questions, these traditional, predictable questions. But I felt you, a person with really remarkable improvisational skills, might be interested in celebrating some holiday. It's just an idea. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. Be like that. Everybody sees me as such a weirdo. It's like whatever the weirdest idea they have, that's what I'm supposed to do. But since I happen to be a weirdo, okay, I'll do it. I'm ready to celebrate a holiday. And clearly the holiday should be the Feast of Saint Bernice. The Feast of Saint Bernice? Now, who exactly is Saint Bernice? Well, if you look her up on the internet, there's only one sentence about Saint Bernice. Saint Bernice, 4th century, she was martyred in Syria with her mother and sister. That's on Catholicism.org. But luckily, I was wandering through the stacks of the Phoenicia Library, and I found this 12th century volume, the Post Leptum Sacra, which compiles many histories of saints. And I learned much more about the esteemed and venerable Saint Bernice. So, how do you picture Saint Bernice? What's your image, your visual image of her? I wonder. Her skin was caramel colored. She had a hawk-like nose. I picture her as looking a great deal like Chief Sitting Bull. And what were her concerns, would you say? Today we would call her a socialist. She loved the poor. She would do anything for the poorest of the poor. She loved to cut their hair, trim their mustaches, devise beautiful adornments for them. She was interested in what we would today call the intersection of socialism, fashion, and theological devotion. Also, she rode around on a primitive bicycle made of twigs known as a grivetine. The wheels were not circular but oval, and sometimes the grivetine was self-propelled and sometimes pulled by a donkey. You mean to tell me that in the 4th century there was a bicycle, a proto-bicycle made of twigs? I'm supposed to believe that it's possible to make a vehicle simply out of wood that behaves like a bicycle? You're telling me you've never read the Post Leptum Sacra? Probably the most essential book of 4th century Syrian theology? I've skimmed it, but my Syrio-Greek of the early post-Roman era is not as strong as it should be, I have to confess. I'm sorry. Anyway, please tell me more about St. Bernice. What were her hobbies? She loved to dance. Back then, saints could still dance. Believe it or not, it was possible in early Syria for a saint to sort of wiggle around like this, even worse than this. Some of the dances we would now call erotic, but they were saintly then. You see, the whole religious superstructure of the world has changed since then. I knew this guy was some sort of a nut. I mean, that's why I had him on my show. I heard he was interesting, but this obsession with some kind of ancient Catholicism, it's creepy. It's unnatural. It's disturbing, I find. To be honest, I was really hoping for more interest on the part of this host, who's supposedly some kind of intellectual, in the subject of St. Bernice. She's one of the most remarkable figures in the Catholic canon. But this guy seems to have no curiosity about her. I mean, I just discovered her yesterday in this book here, and I don't, it's like I get these enthusiasms, I show them, I try to bring them to the other people in this world, and nobody gets what I'm talking about. Are there any stories from that book that stand out in your mind? There's a story about St. Bernice participating in a sanctitude contest. Now, sanctitude, I'm sure you know, means holiness. Back then they had these contests that somewhat similar to poetry slams today. And two or more religious people would get together and they would compete publicly to see who was the most spiritual. And they would say prayers, and then there would be an objective authority called a pecularium, who would assess which was the winner, which was the most religious. So St. Bernice very much wanted to win this sanctitude contest. She wanted to use the prize money to make silk gowns for the poor. She loved this idea of the poor being very nobly dressed. So she tries her best to be the most religious, and she loses to an obscure baker named Claudius. But she's also happy that she lost. This quality, which was very common in 4th century Syria, this desire to win, but also a desire to lose, was associated with religious people. It was known as penitential ambivalence. Nowadays, we think of saints as very one-directional. They just want one thing. They just want to be beloved by God or to praise God or something. Back then, saints were allowed to be conflicted, to have two competing desires simultaneously. That was congruent with sainthood. It was a much more complex world than the world we live in now. We live in a world where there's no allowance for the dualistic battle within a person. Tom Cruise is only Tom Cruise. He's never the opposite of Tom Cruise. He's never a lonely beggar wandering through the streets of Sao Paulo. I feel like I'm losing control of this show. I came here with a particular plan. Maybe we would celebrate Veterans Day. And now he's just taking it in this excruciating direction. I hate religion myself. I'm utterly irreligious. I'm a man of the mind, of the intellect and the rational process. That's why I have this show. And these series of impossible contradictions in this dude are, they're sort of fascinating but horrifying. From the point of view of a scholar and a thinker, what he's saying is impossible, makes no sense. But I find myself drawn ineluctably towards his conclusion. Where's he going? That's what I want to know. But didn't saints each have a particular specialty? What was Saint Bernice's area of expertise? Saint Bernice was the protector of whales, the animal whales, not the nation of Wales. She probably never heard of Wales in the British Isles because she lived in Syria. She lived a very cloistered life. But she somehow became associated with whales. It's not clear completely how. She lived in the coastal town of Daraa, Syria, and it's possible that she saved a beached whale or somehow ministered to such a creature, or perhaps she stood on the shore sending out psalms to the distant mammalian cousins. We can only speculate as to the connection between this wonderful mystic and the largest of animals. So, are you prepared now to actually celebrate the feast of Saint Bernice right here on this show? Is that possible for you? Yes, I'm absolutely prepared to celebrate the beloved Saint Bernice. I have this little pennant, it says Moon Man, you see, and I have a ginger root, the traditional vegetable totem of Saint Bernice, and I'm going to sing the Saint Bernice song. Ready? Is that okay? Saint Bernice, Saint Bernice, you guard the whales, you bring us peace. Sing along at home. Saint Bernice, Saint Bernice, you guard the whales, you bring us peace. You know, this guy he's so much the opposite of me that I hate him. I despise everything he does, but first of all, I can't understand it. That makes no sense to me, but also it's very charming. It's very childlike. It's like I've been studying since the age of 6 to get my PhD, to get my postdoctorate, to get my postdoctorate. I've just lost that ability to be really stupid and foolish. And I just am filled with a kind of depressive regret looking at this fellow. It's painful. Like looking, you know, it's like staring into the sun. It burns your eyes. This guy burns my soul, even though I don't have one. Is there anything else you would like to discuss besides Saint Bernice? Well, no. What else is there to talk about besides Saint Bernice? No. But one thing I'd like to do is I'd like to sing a song, another song, that I think Saint Bernice would have loved. It's by the Supremes. It's called Come See About Me. Now, this guitar, my wife, when she was 14 years old, she bought this guitar in Russia. And it's been sitting in her room ever since. So it's completely out of tune. It can't be tuned. It has no semblance. It just looks like a guitar. It's actually playing something that you and I cannot understand as music. And here it is. Come See About Me. I've been crying, ooh, ooh, 'cause I'm lonely for you. Smiles have all turned to tears, but tears won't wash away the fears that you're never ever gonna return, to ease the fire within me that burns. It keeps me crying, baby, for you. Gonna keep on sighing, baby, for you. So won't you hurry? Come on, boy, and see about me. Come see about me. See about me, baby. Come see about me. Giving up my friends just for you. My friends are gone and you have too. No peace shall I find till you come back and be mine. No matter what you do or say, I'm gonna love you any old way. I'm gonna keep on crying, baby, for you. Gonna keep on sighing, baby, for you. So won't you come on and see about me. Come see about me. Yeah, that was for St. Bernice. That was one of the most self-satisfied, narcissistic pieces of moron worship I have ever encountered. And then he's going to do that, and supposedly that's for St. Bernice. I mean, that makes it all right. You know what I mean? That makes it spiritual. He's such a jerk off, to use a technical psychological term. Well, I feel like I really won the battle of wills between me and this Dr. Waraps. And he's just speechless now. He's like reduced to saran wrap. I can see through him like a glass boat. I've done what I needed to do. It was a little brutal, but it was necessary. I did a little surgery on this guy's brain, and I'm kind of proud of myself. And now I'm going to top it off with a few brilliant poems. Well, Sparrow, you certainly are versatile. Unfortunately, we're getting towards the end of our show here. Is there anything else you'd like to add? So here's some poems that I feel St. Bernice, if she were alive today, if she were in the room with us, and let's face it, she is in the room with us, I think she would especially appreciate. So with your permission, I'm going to read some poems that I'm pretty sure St. Bernice would love. In fact, the first one has love in the title. It's called Love Poem. I love poems. You see, it's called Love Poem, and it's got love and poems in it. So it's kind of, the poem kind of is the title is the poem. You know, it's like you have an expectation. You hear love poem. You expect a certain kind of poem. You don't expect that I, the person in the poem, love poems themselves. You see, I'm taking the whole poem into another room, if you will. You know, if the mind is a house, I'm moving you, I'm pulling you from the bathroom into the guest room. You see? I think that my explanation succeeded in being more mystifying than the poem itself. That's the goal I'm after. I want to explain it in such a way that this eminent brain will never be able to understand it. And here's another poem I think you and St. Bernice together might enjoy. It's called Assessment. Calligraphy would not help this poem. In other words, if you were a calligrapher, someone who draws words beautifully, who prints beautifully, if a calligrapher were to take that poem and make it the most elegant calligraphic masterpiece, still wouldn't help, still be a dumb poem. I'm talking about beauty. What is beauty? Beauty is ugliness. Ugliness is beauty. That's what this poem is sort of suggesting. Ugliness itself, like my song, my butchering of the Supremes song. But it was also a tribute to the Supremes, which in the same way this poem is a destruction of all poetry and yet a tribute to the beauty of poetry. You see what I'm saying? Now let me see, I must have another poem here that would, yeah, this one I think I'll read, if you don't mind. I know you're running out of time, but listen, it's a pretty short poem. It's called LSD. I've taken too much LSD, so my poems come out like these. Really, I should rewrite the poem like this. LSD. I've taken too much LSDs, so my poems come out like these. See, then it rhymes perfectly. But see, LSD is not typically used as a plural. You can't pluralize LSD, put an S at the end to make it LSDs. But that's very funny. See, to me, LSDs, these, very funny. I mean, not to you, not to anyone else, but that's okay. I don't really even take LSD. I hate drugs. Totally against drugs. That's part of the joke of the poem. Druglessness is my drug. And it's really what I'm saying in this poem is, don't take LSD. Just write poems. Be stupid. You don't need a verschlungener drug to give you permission to be stupid. Just give yourself permission to be stupid. Like, for example, I'm going to read this poem, which I think is really beautiful. It's called Tucked In. I like to be tucked in at night, even by a pit bull. Just that image of me lying in my bed at night with a pit bull at my side on the floor, kind of gently tucking in the blankets. That is a brilliant visual concept, really. The loving pit bull. I think I've invented. I'm going to read it again. It's such a good poem. Tucked in. I like to be tucked in at night, even by a pit bull. And pit bull is such a beautiful word. It's such a beautiful word that's also an ugly word. Like a beautiful dog that's also an ugly dog. It's a threatening dog that's also a lovable dog. Like the word pit bull is a threatening word. Pit bull, pit bull, pit bull. And then there's an exclamation point at the end of the poem. The pit bull exclamation point. Just to emphasize the pit bulliness of the pit bull. I'm really enjoying explicating my poems. My poems need to be understood by all of humanity. I'll end with this poem. It's called I Told My Therapist. I prefer poems without meaning. You see? Why put meaning in a poem? It only wrecks the poem. Poems don't have to have meaning. Like this poem has no meaning. I told my therapist I prefer poems without meaning. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. That's the poem. The poem itself is what it's talking about. Because when you drain the meaning out of something, and I think St. Bernice would 100% agree with me, even though she maybe didn't exist, just between you and me, that then you can begin to see it without the cloak of meaning over it. It's like this guitar. You play this guitar, no meaning, you see? It has no meaning. It's beautiful. It's necessary. Meaning makes things trivial. I'm taking the meaning out of even this interview. This interview no longer has any meaning. I've pulled the meaning. I've sucked the meaning out of this interview. And now it's meaningless. And that's something you and I can share. Because you're meaningless too. We're meaningless. But that doesn't mean we're unimportant. We're very, very important, but very meaningless. Or whatever I mean. So I'm starting to move beyond the limitations of my own thinking. I'm not that big a thinker, not a great thinker, unlike Dr. Warap's here. And I'm trying to shed the shell of my own skull and kind of think beyond my internal self into something else, but I don't even know what's there. And first of all, it's starting to scare me a little bit, like the one time I did take LSD. And second of all, I can't do it. I can't reach beyond even my own beyondness. I can only be Sparrow, being meta Sparrow, but then beyond that, I can't quite see. That's why I'm waiting to die, like all of us, to see if I can reach beyond this corporeal substance. I think, to me, Saint Bernice, who, it doesn't matter if there was a Saint Bernice or if there could be a Saint Bernice. I'm talking about, to me, that's what there is instead of drugs. There's the opportunity for holiness. But the problem is, we all misunderstand holiness. We think that holiness is some sort of magic dust that you sprinkle on something. It's really, holiness is very simple. It's just the simple you without all your attempts to be interesting. You want to be interesting, you want to be likable, you want to have good looks. But underneath that, this part of you that you don't even think exists, this kind of baby part of you, that's the holiness part. It's still there. You're still a baby inside of yourself. You just want to pretend you're not. Since I don't have a job, I have a lot of time to notice that I'm a baby. I feel like I've been thrown into a garbage can, then thrown from the garbage can into the garbage truck, taken to the town dump, thrown onto the top of the dump, and now I'm sitting there, just waiting for some friend of mine to come by and take me home. I just feel like I've been spat out, chewed up, eaten up, and spat out by this self-glorifying weirdo, this self-glorifying anti-poet. And it's exhausting. The phrase colossal waste of time comes to mind. I just wish that I had investigated this guy better before I invited him on. I honestly had no idea he was so imbecilic, so relentlessly dopey. If only he had some talent, it might make up for this spectacle. But it's pathetic. I really need a nice glass of Matus after that. I'm going to be so delighted to go home, back to my house, pick up a copy of The New Yorker, lie in bed and rest after this. Well, this train wreck continues on in his blundering existence. I mean, I feel sorry for him, really. It's a sad waste of humanity. Obviously, he has some intelligence, some good will, but it's all spiraled down a kind of shower stall of ugly dirtiness. Well, Sparrow, it's been my pleasure to have you here, and I appreciate very much your unique contributions. And I want to thank you personally for coming, for being my guest. Well, it was my pleasure. I mean, really, I had a great time, and I was surprised how comfortable I felt, and here in your office, and I hope I can come back many times. I feel like I've just really begun to get to just the very beginning of my thoughts about poetry, poetics, anti-poetics, the meaning of fourth century Christianity, and I know it was a little perhaps outre, a little odd for you, but I thought you were wonderfully astute and welcoming, really. I just felt at home. I mean, this is pretty much the best I can expect from the world, and that's been great. Thanks so much. And, I would like to give you the kiss of peace now. Oh. I'm the winner. I beat him.